In the summer of 1819, Manchester was a city on edge. It was the beating heart of Britain's new industrial economy, a place of mills, smoke, and restless energy. But it was also a place of misery. Tens of thousands lived in grinding poverty, working long hours in the textile mills for pitiful wages. The end of the Napoleonic Wars had brought not prosperity, but unemployment, hunger, and despair. And out of this frustration grew a movement for reform. Workers, artisans, and campaigners across the north of England began calling for parliamentary representation, for fairer laws, and for dignity. Their leaders believed in peaceful protest, not violence, and in August of 1819, they decided to make their voices heard. A vast crowd gathered at St. Peter's Field in Manchester. Men, women, and children marched in their Sunday best, determined to show they came not as rioters, but as citizens. Estimates suggest as many as 60,000 filled the open space. They carried banners calling for liberty and reform. They sang, cheered, and waited to hear their chosen speakers. But the authorities saw something very different. To the local magistrates, this was not a peaceful assembly. It was a threat. They feared revolution, a northern echo of the French uprising just a generation earlier. And so, as the speeches began, the order was given to arrest the leaders and disperse the crowd. What followed was chaos. The Yeomanry, local volunteer cavalry, charged into the mass of people, sabres drawn. Panic spread as families tried to flee. Horses trampled over men, women, and children. The regular cavalry joined the attack, cutting through the terrified crowd. When the dust settled, the scale of the tragedy became clear. At least 15 people were dead. Hundreds more lay injured, slashed by sabres, crushed by horses, or suffocated in the stampede. What was meant to be a peaceful call for democracy had ended in bloodshed. The newspapers quickly gave the massacre its name, Peterloo, a bitter reference to Waterloo, the site of Britain's famous victory just 4 years earlier. At St. Peter's Field, however, the enemy had not been Napoleon's army. It had been the British people themselves. The government tried to justify the violence, tightening laws against public gatherings, but the horror of Peterloo could not be forgotten. It became a rallying cry for reformers across Britain. In the decades that followed, the struggle for representation continued, leading at last to the Reform Acts that began to widen the vote. Peterloo was a tragedy, but it was also a turning point. It revealed the deep injustices of Britain's political system and the determination of ordinary people to fight peacefully for their rights. The blood spilled on that August day in Manchester helped lay the foundations of the democracy we know today, a grim reminder that freedom is often won not by kings and generals, but by citizens who dare to gather, to speak, and to be heard.